All right. Hi, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 2nd, and this is the biweekly Cloud Provider SIG meeting. I will share my screen, and then we can get started with agenda. Y'all can see this?
I can see it.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So yeah, I think last week we said we're going to try to go through issue triage first instead of last, and hopefully that kind of helps us manage our time a bit better. So yeah, let's do that. Let me just open these up. All right, I do think I think we triaged some of these last week. So like, I think we can skip this one. We were sending this to storage folks. Same with this. I think we redirected this. Oh, I think this one needs to be. So these two are done, I think, because they're storage folks need to look at it. I think really it's these two that we need to go through. So we'll start with this one. Azure load balancer not reconciled properly.
Yeah, I took a look at this one before the meeting, and the weird thing is, it looks like he's just getting it, like can't find the IP address, which, okay, but he can't reproduce it. So what was leading to the IP address not being visible? I'm not sure. And apparently he doesn't have a way to reproduce it. So unless that looks familiar to people, I can't even, I mean, it's the Entry Cloud Provider. So, or the CCM, the Cloud Controller Manager. So yeah, I'm open to suggestions. And I did mention to him as well that even if we can diagnose this, if the problem only exists in the version that he's using, it's going out of support in April. So like, yeah, it would be nice to know if we could get it reproduced in a newer version to see if it still exists. That was kind of my initial thoughts, but maybe something in there jumps out at someone.
I have seen, like, not specific to Azure, but I have seen similar bugs like this where like there's logic in the provider to match against an IP that was existing before.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, if there's something externally that might have deleted the load balancer or the IP by accident, then the controller tries to look at the load balancer again for that IP, because the IP is stored in the status, or like IP is stored in an annotation or something. And then it'll try to reference it back. But then when it queries the cloud provider, because a new load balancer was created without that IP, then it kind of gets stuck.
Yeah.
Kind of like an orphaned service or load balancer, say. But you're right. Like, hard to say without being able to reproduce the actual issue.
I mean, even if we thought we had a fix and we thought we could test it, since we can't reproduce the error, I don't know how we could possibly be expected to say we solved it.
Yeah,
that's one of those, you know.
Do you think?
I don't know.
Do you think we accept it though, or should we just?
Sure, you can accept it, assign it to me, and I'll watch it. But like, okay, unless we can reproduce it, I don't know how we can fix it, because we won't know if a fix works, right? Like, I'm kind of.
We should make. I think Andrew's doing that now, but yeah, we should do that in the comments. Just say if we can't reproduce it, there's no way we can fix it effectively. You know.
Yeah, and I did reply to the guy earlier and thanked him for the bug report, and I did say it would be nice to see a reproduction in a more recent version of Kubernetes, just because, like, even if we somehow come up with an answer tomorrow and get it in, like 1.21, if that's the only place it exists, is entering maintenance mode very soon. So like, yeah, we would want to be able to reproduce it for sure. I know that's such an unhelpful answer, but like, what are we going to do?
Well, and if Andrew's line of thinking is like correct here, right? And maybe there was some out of band thing that happened, like a load balancer disappearing. It's like, well, how are we ever going to figure that part out?
You want to include that in your comment to him, Andrew? Just be like, hey, be aware of the fact that any of your things external to your cluster could, I don't know how you want to put that, but like be a factor.
Yeah, I can add a comment follow-up because that might take a while
Yeah.
for me to write.
Yeah,
But
yeah. But okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I said, yep, this is,
Okay, great.
I want to try to reproduce it. I just am not sure how. So.
Sounds good. All right. Missing annotation to specify private static IPs for AWS NLB.
That's a feature request, so I think we should either ask them to open it on the Cloud Provider repo, or I can copy it over.
I will assign. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to just do that now?
I can do it.
Okay.
I'll do
So
it
then
right now.
I'll leave the needs triage then, because we're gonna close it, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
do this
close it.
already in the load balancer controller. So we decided not to support in the entry provider because it was
I'll also-
deprecated anyway. So
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, cool. That just leaves so this one, which is going to be closed, and then this one, which storage will get. So I think that's it for triage today.
I actually had one question about one that we already triaged, but don't really have good answers to. 106543. I replied to the person and basically told them, hey, go over to the Kubernetes SIG's Azure file CSI driver repo. But since we can't move issues between KK and the Kubernetes SIG's org, I don't think you can move issues between orgs. And so I'm not sure, like, what's our next step if we think we've told you that this is handled by, he's trying to use some stuff in the legacy entry, or sorry, the Azure files provisioner that he's looking at. Like, if you look at it, there is some stuff in KK, but everyone's telling him use, the CSI driver. Like, what's our take on that? Maybe this is a SIG storage question, but like, what's our take on that?
Yeah, like it's a similar pattern to like some of the other stuff where we're saying like all the external, like the new load balancer controller supports it. So same here, like kind of redirecting to CSI driver. I think that I guess like, yeah, asking folks to create an issue on the CSI driver seems.
Yeah, well, look up and see what I said in December, but I'm like, I'm not sure. I just want to make sure I'm scoping this correctly. I suggested to the user, maybe you want to close this issue, and then a different user came in and was like, we have the same problem. And I'm thinking, I don't know if we want to direct people to SIG storage or tell people to go to the CSI drivers or something else. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want kind of an authoritative, this is where we send you now, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's tricky because we still have code in KK for specific providers. So like I imagine there's like an overlap of users that are like using entry and like some users using CSI. So I think the hard answer is like, depending on the specific issue and the way it overlaps with the code entry and the code out of tree, it's going to depend on that, I think.
Yeah, and like this one, I dug into it back in December, and basically Azure Red Hat OpenShift, so it's a Red Hat managed thing, but on Azure, does not support what they're asking for. But if they use the Azure file like CSI driver, that does have the NFS support that they want. But it's like, yeah, this is kind of one of those, like, they're in that kind of gap of support.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. When it starts going to like specifics to products, like probably not the best place to, like a KK issue is probably not.
And
okay, so
for what it's worth, that CSI driver is still getting delivered in OpenShift. So I imagine that I think you're talking about the Rosa product, I think is the Azure, or is it Arrow? I think
Arrow, yeah.
Arrow is the Azure one. Yeah. So like I have a feeling that once that CSI driver gets deployed to OpenShift, then like the next step will be it'll make it to Arrow. So it's going to be a couple cycles probably before it gets there.
Right, exactly. Anyway, so I wanted to bring this one up just because this issue, while having been triaged, is still an open issue. And when I looked in the collection of open issues for this SIG, I was like, should this issue even be open or should it be here? Yeah, what do you think we should do with it?
Given what you were saying and what Andrew was saying too, like I feel like directing people to go to SIG storage is probably the best move. Because like if there's a question about whether a new feature or issue should be brought against the CSI drivers or against what's still in KK, I feel like that's probably a question that SIG storage would be better equipped to answer at least, because if every one of these has to be kind of dissected to say, okay, does it fit here or does it fit there? Maybe
Yeah.
being closer to the experts is better. I don't know.
What do you think, Andrew? Do you want to call out to SIG storage on the issue and just see if they want to weigh in? Just because it's still sitting here tagged with SIG Cloud Provider. So
from historical context, I think SIG storage has made it clear that they don't own like provider specific drivers, and that's why like if you go to the Kubernetes community repo and stuff, like the ownership of the various like Azure CSI and like AWS CSI, like they're technically under our SIG, because the SIG storage folk, like the SIG storage folk has to manage like all these other like general purpose CSI drivers too. But yeah, I agree. Like the expertise kind of falls both ways. I think for this one, like we can just close it.
okay.
But Bridget, I'll let you do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give them another reply and be like, hey, as we pointed out, please go look over here. If this doesn't solve your stuff, here's the link again to the Arrow like support and /close. I don't want to leave it just sitting there, but like I guess what I'm saying is I don't think KK is going to give them an answer here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, as background, the way this came about is because I was involved with the original CSI. The drafting of it felt that it was, at the time it was done, orchestrator agnostic. So it was done for Apache Mesos, Docker Swarm, and Kubernetes. And the ownership is over in the CNCF, under the CNCF storage SIG. But even they kick the CSI things kind of sort of out of a tree. But if there's any org that is closer to owning CSI, it's that CNCF storage SIG and not anything under Kubernetes.
Right, absolutely. Okay, I will just write back to the user and explain this again and close it. Thank you.
I was going to offer to, did you want me to try and poke a red hatter about dropping a comment here from one of our storage or Arrow folks? Like, do you think it's
if you want, I mean, like I looked at the documentation, as you can see where I linked them on December 9th. I looked at the documentation and like Arrow doesn't support the Azure file CSI driver right now. Will it someday? Yeah, probably. It doesn't right now. So yeah.
Okay. I'll see if I can get someone to make a comment on this too, just to help.
I mean, if somebody wants to give them like roadmap stuff, that would be fine. I don't have that at least close to hand myself, but
yeah, me neither. But I know some people who probably do have it, and they could just like say, yeah, it's coming. You're gonna have to wait 6 months or something,
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I do think you did raise a good point, Bridget, that like we probably have a ton of triage issues that are assigned that'll
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't want to open a can of worms. I suppose we can get to the rest of the agenda and then come back if we have time.
What was that issue number, just out of curiosity?
Oh, this was 106-543.
I'll drop it in the chat there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, maybe we can have a discussion about these another time.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry for the digression. I was just like, this is still sitting here.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I guess we'll go through the sub-project updates quickly. Okay, cool. I don't see anyone from these two here, so we'll go straight to AWS. Any updates worth calling out here?
I don't think I have anything. Kishore, do you have anything?
No, I don't either for this. Thank you.
Bridget, anything on the Azure side?
No, nothing specific since last time we chatted. Happy Lunar New Year.
Cool. GCP, am I the only? Yeah, I don't have anything. I'm still onboarding, to be honest, so I don't have anything to add. IBM, no updates. Actually, you know what I realized? Michael, I'm wondering if, like, I know like Red Hat doesn't have, or like OpenShift doesn't have a provider, but like given there's like all these issues that are crossing OpenShift and cloud provider, it's like I'm wondering, do you think it'd be worthwhile to add a sub-project update here for OpenShift, or do you think not needed?
Well, probably not. But like, I'm happy to I try to bring issues that we're working on, because you're right. We work across many of the providers here, like Alibaba, AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM Cloud, OpenStack, vSphere. I mean, so aside from Baidu and Huawei, yeah, we're touching all those things, but usually we don't, unless we find a bug, there's usually not much interaction for us or no real updates. We do have requests for features every once in a while, but like they haven't come in really heavy on the cloud providers yet. So I'm not sure that it makes sense to have an update from the Red Hat or from OpenShift.
Or maybe another way to put it is like, I think anyone should feel free to like add things under the provider. Like you don't have to be a maintainer of the provider to add notes. So like if you run into bugs with whichever one, just like drop a note, and we'll just take it like that.
All right, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I remember I've brought up GCP stuff here before, and I think I see you've already got this 107.750, which has gotten a lot of attention inside Red Hat recently. So yeah, I mean, I'll just keep bringing up issues as I see them, but happy to put them under the provider specific columns.
Good. Okay, vSphere, I'm guessing that was LeBron. Do you want to give an update on the 123 release?
Yeah, by the way, I put it later in the agenda, but I just thought that Andrew, since you moved to Google, VMware has recruited a couple other meeting participants for this meeting. So maybe you want to invite LeBron to introduce himself, and then there might be another person who intends to start attending these meetings as well.
Yeah, good call. LeBron, do you want to just introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, hello everyone. This is LeBron Gan. I used to work with Andrew in VMware in the same team. So we are both maintainers of the cloud provider vSphere.
Welcome aboard, LeBron.
Yeah, welcome.
Nice to meet you all. Yeah, updates will be just we got a 1.23 release next week.
Awesome. On the extraction migration, I think there's just reviewing keps. I think there's not much aside from that. So if you have kept, okay, well actually we'll just talk about keps later because that's kind of a bigger topic. So yeah, let's go straight into the agenda. I did want to follow up with one action item that we had about adding more approvers to legacy cloud provider. So last week we added Nick in there. So hopefully he can help us go through the backlog of cherry picks that need to be approved. And then, yeah, the next item, I put two, they're probably the same topic, but there was one PR, I think from someone from Red Hat, I think. And then there was
a Red
another
Hatter.
PR, yeah, and there's another PR from someone from AWS, I think, where do I start? Okay, maybe I'll start with this one. So this one is fixing a bug where the IPv6 address, like we weren't doing a proper equality check on the v6 address, which resulted in like addresses like this that get truncated to not be equal because we did a string check. And then there's some talk about like always putting the canonical IPv6 string inside the status. And I was wondering, like, that seems correct, but if we did that, we could end up breaking clients somehow. And I was wondering if anyone had thoughts about that. Like, if we forced all of these 6 fields to use the canonical like representation, would that result in like some controllers trying to go in some kind of loop to like update them?
That would be a bug in the controller, arguably.
Yeah, that's
Well, it seems like outputting the canonical representation in logs or whatever seems smart. With IPv6, there's a number of valid input formats, and it strikes me maybe we should take them all so long as they're valid.
yeah, that's a valid point too. Like we should always compare them using the same.
Yeah, when you do the compare, I think the only way to have it be reliable is to take both sides of the compare. If you're going to do a string compare, you'd have to convert them to canonical to have that be valid if you're going to use a string compare.
Okay, yeah, I think that's why we opted to keep this PR just to update this. But okay, yeah. But if anyone has opinions of like what the field should actually be set to, yeah, we should talk about that. But this is also a heads up that this bug seems like if you're running v6 and you're one of the entry cloud providers, you'll probably run into this bug. There's also like this bug about what the expected behavior is if you set the node IP flag in the kubelet and you're running an external cloud provider. And I'm on the fence about what we should do here. So like this PR is proposing that we shuffle the address sorting so that the provided node IP is always first, which I think is safe, but I wanted to hear what people thought on the call.
So I'm interested to understand what you think would be dangerous about that. And if we don't do that, then is that flag worthless? And should it be essentially deprecated?
Yeah, and just for a little background here, in case not everybody's up to it, like up to speed. Like the problem that we're seeing is that when we bring up a node and like start the kubelet, we have this happens a lot on OpenStack, but it also happens on I think we've seen it happen on VMware as well, if I'm remembering that correctly. But like, when we start the kubelet, we'll have one IP address that's kind of like the main IP address we want to use. And then when the CCM comes in, it gets multiple IP addresses and it chooses a different one, right? And so that's causing this dissonance when the node object comes up, and then when we try to link the IP addresses. So that's kind of like, I know that the folks internally at Red Hat have been working on this. They want some way to like authoritatively know which IP addresses are going to be supplied there. And I think what Stefan is proposing, or maybe Matt's proposing it in this one, is the ability to more positively know that when we inject that IP at the kubelet using the flag, that will also appear for the CCM, so that we don't have this dissonance between the two places.
Yeah, I think that like to make it like more deterministic.
Right. And again, this like from the controller side, from the operator side, like we know which IP address should be right on the OpenStack platform because we know like the ordering of the networks and whatnot. But it just seems like, sometimes the CCM comes up and just chooses the other one, or it's based on the host operating system, how it's ordering, the NICs when they get listed by that, by that process. So it's like, it's not always deterministic the way we'd like it to be.
Yeah, so going back to Nick's question, I think it's only, so generally like the pattern is that when you set the node address, you set like one internal IP, one external IP, and one host name. And generally the ordering in that sense doesn't matter because the kubelet has its own like ordering where it checks internal IP or like in kube API server, you can set the preferred like address type order. But I think the problem is like if you have multiple internal IPs, then you can't. The order is then random from kubelet, and that causes issues. And so that's why the node IP being first is useful. But then I don't actually know why it could be unsafe, but it is like a change in the API, and I'm just trying to think through how it could be unsafe before we go ahead and just kind of merge it.
I feel like if it's unsafe, it's because someone is doing something unsafe already. You know, they're relying on a specific ordering to appear when it may not be predictable, you know, and it might have just been working for them so far. But like these things should be very explicit at that level in terms of what nick you're grabbing and everything.
What's the state? What was the like, I don't know, original description of the node IP flag, or original intent of it? Was it just to?
It was just to ensure that like one of the addresses matches the node IP, but it had no semantics around ordering.
This smacks of load bearing bug.
I mean, yeah, it's bringing down our house for some deployments right now. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There was another question about that label, about that that flag too, and this is something that came up during our discussion. I'm just going to see if I can find it quickly. There was a well-known label that used to be that was marked as alpha, and I've never seen it marked as deprecated. The alpha.kubernetes.io/provided node IP.
That's what it is. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Right. So like this was one of the questions that I had when we were talking about this internally, is like, is that annotation or is that label still in use, and how does it match up with that node IP command line flag?
Yeah, so the node IP flag is one of those weird things where it is a kubelet flag, but when like during the external provider transition, we sort of we're kind of forced to port over some of that functionality into external providers. So basically, if you set node IP and if you're not setting a cloud provider, then the kubelet uses that IP when it registers itself. If you are using external cloud provider, it sets that alpha annotation on the node object, and when the node controller sees the node object, it can then read that IP through the annotation, and then it'll validate the returned addresses from the provider and ensure that that IP exists. Otherwise, it errors the initialization and the node never gets registered. So it's kind of like a way to ensure like a node has the right IP before it's actually accepted into the cluster.
Right. But I mean, isn't that like, to me, this label that seems like the mechanism that we should be using to synchronize between the kubelet start and the CCM ordering, right? Because like the CCM loads up and gets some list of IP addresses. And if one of those IP addresses matches what this label is, that's the IP address it should choose, because that's the IP address that the kubelet was set with the flag. So like when we were talking about this internally and no one could answer what that label was used, like my thought was like this label is effectively the communication between these two processes.
Yeah. And almost always it does do that, because it ensures one of the addresses is the node IP one. But yeah, like there are certain cases, especially like with dual stack being more common, where if you have multiple internal IPs, then the order matters. And so then we need to like change the current node, the way the current node IP behaves, and also ensure that the order is first. So I think really, yeah, like,
or rely on this label, right? Because like we wouldn't have to care about the ordering if the label is always correct for what the flag was set as, because we could always check if the label matches one of the IP addresses. So to me,
that's what we already do. Like we already checked the annotation for an address, and we already translate that into the status.
We just don't.
But like you have to update the status though, because the status is read by API server and the kubelet and whatever else. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm not understanding that part of it.
So with kubelet today, if you set node IP, does that IP show up first in the list of addresses?
It could show up first. It's not deterministic. Yeah. So Michael, like maybe another way to put it is the node at the address list, the list of addresses in the node status, that is the actual API for how the entire system like knows like what IP to use to connect to a node. The alpha annotation is just a way for the kubelet to pass the preferred node IP into the CCM, so the CCM knows which IP to put in the status eventually. But like it's the status that is really like the actual API, and like the annotation, it feels kind of like a hack that we're using to just like pass that preferred IP down.
Okay, so like given that, then yeah, I'll flip back to the notion that the status block then should be ordered the way we want it, right? Yeah, so that does make sense to me.
Yeah, and then this PR is basically saying like if we have the annotation, which is like here, somewhere here. So yeah, like this function ensure node is checking this annotation. And this is just, instead of just checking that it exists, it's saying shuffle it so that it's always first. Which I think is right. I think that's right. I'm just trying to think if it could break anything. But maybe it's one of those changes where like it's worth it to maybe break some of those like weird clients that are doing weird things, so that most people
I think
have
so.
like,
yeah, I think it's worth it to break it and see who breaks, and then just fix those places.
okay. Anyways, I think okay, yeah. So yeah, I guess action item, please review this PR and provide feedback. But yeah, I'll also review it soon, because I know it's breaking some things. Okay, Bridget, I think you have the next item.
Yes, I wanted to follow up because we had a topic of, oh, hey, as I believe the GCP folks had noted that there was a dependency deep in Kubernetes that seemed to be pointing at Azure, and that was sort of weird. I followed up, I asked internally, I was like, following the chain of who maintains this specific thing, and they said, oh, we're going to be cycling that out. And I'm like, okay, because I said, do we want to go through like CNCF processes or some other foundation? Is this a project that should stand on its own over in some other, governorship? And the short version of what I got is, oh, we're actually going to be moving away from that into something else. So I'm not sure if that's a complete solution or a complete answer, but we probably aren't going to move that specific GitHub repo at any point in the near to distant future. So I don't know if that gives you enough answers. Andrew, was it you who was asking about that? I forgot.
I don't think it was me.
Okay. It might have been Walter.
Yeah.
Okay. We can follow up with Walter when he's back as well, but anyway, yeah. And this was surfaced because of how I think it's the transitive dependencies show up now, whereas they didn't before. So
yeah, makes sense. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll follow up with Walter on that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Nick, you want to talk about new meeting times?
Yes. So I had a poll in the SIG Cloud Provider Slack channel. It looks like a few people have answered it. So if anybody here hasn't yet, go ahead and do that. Right now, it looks like the morning times are winning. So I believe 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And it's all for Wednesday. I didn't propose changing the day. I think 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. are winning right now. So yeah, if you strongly disagree with either of those times, then be sure to vote if you haven't already.
Sorry, is this in Kubernetes Standard Time, which I assume is Pacific or
It's
other?
specific, yeah. Yeah, right. Kubernetes Standard Time, exactly. It is specific, and yeah. So I think, I don't know, we can leave it up until, I don't know, end of the day today,
Sure.
or something along those lines, and then we'll see what's got the most votes, and we can reschedule next meeting for that time.
I'm cool with making it effective next meeting.
Cool. Okay, sounds good. That's it.
Okay, cool. Okay, Steve, do you mind if we talk about the KubeCon stuff last, and then we can?
Sure. And then you already talked about the intro. One thing related to that, Lubron got a bad Zoom link. He joined the Google group, and then you get a welcome to the group email with, I think, an old Zoom link. So I don't know where that's recorded. The one in the Kubernetes community calendar is good. And of course, the link in this agenda notes doc is good, but apparently somebody new who joins the group gets sent a bad meeting link.
Okay. LeBron, do you mind following up with me on Slack and pointing me to where that is?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Wilbur. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Bridget, do you want to talk about the mixed protocol cap?
So I think everyone or most people on this call already know this because I brought it up a bunch of times and everyone's kind of weighed in and put their own changes, fixes in, but just giving everyone a, hey, excellent, we are moving this forward. So for all the work that you've been doing to make sure that you handle, mixed protocol on services correctly, thank you. And it looks like we are going to move from alpha to beta, and just with the reminder that moving something from alpha to beta means it's on by default. So there'll still be a feature gate and people can still turn it off, but we are moving forward with this. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And I guess like the remaining action items is like if there are any places where we're not validating or handling mixed protocol, we need to just make sure that we.
Yeah, I actually think Google is the one provider that was kind of like, well, our users might get into a weird state, but they, I have a sign off from Tim Hawkins saying, go ahead, go for it. But presumably for your out of tree provider, you're going to make whatever changes you need to make so that your users get the experience you want them to have.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay.
And you have a little time because this will be in 1.24. So the very soonest that this would be turned on by default for your users would be April when 1.24 comes out.
Yep, makes sense. Awesome, thank you. Okay, Steve, do you want to talk about the KubeCon?
Sure, if you want, you can click that link and just open it so we can look at it while we talk. But this is just kind of boilerplate for that CFP. Deadlines coming up on the 14th is indicated here. They changed some of the language and rules on this, but when I went to look at the form, so they're specifically calling out that submitting it doesn't guarantee you're going to get a session. I think they've had a large number of these as they add projects. So, in early days, I think it was viewed as semi-automatic for SIGs to get a session, but apparently no longer the case. They also cut the size of the abstract from 750 characters down to 500. So I put a tentative title there. I'm not strongly attached to that in any way. It's just kind of generic, but if anybody else wants to take a crack, that's an edit link to that document. So go replace it if you like, as far as I'm concerned. The detailed description, there's a couple things that I was putting there. Look at that last line of, we'll also discuss plans to handle TBD. So this would be things that maybe we didn't cover in the last one that are new on the agenda. I think Walter threw out a few in our last meeting, but I didn't keep it in the notes. And I thought maybe I'd go back and catch the video, but it's not there yet. So I think Walter actually had some ideas for this, but I don't recall what they were. So we just have room. We don't have a lot of characters. Maybe these two TBDs, if we can blow like 30 characters to describe a few other line items. And as far as I'm concerned, I think this is probably good enough. With 500 characters, you can't do much other than just a broad description. And I think the only thing maybe open for discussion is I personally like that effort we did last time of kind of these lightning talks for individual cloud providers that we took as recordings. And I think it might be nice to do that again, but maybe others feel differently. And that's a good way to have the whole community involved in this session. And I think I learned something from other cloud providers by watching those lightning talks myself. So I'd like to do that again, but let's open it up for discussion if somebody's against that idea. I think we don't need that in our CFP proposal. We can worry about exactly what's there. We'll just call out that we're going to have lightning talks in the abstract and get it in the schedule so people know there's a slot for them.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then, the other thing is they're allowing up to 4 people designated as speakers. In my experience, you can actually shift those roles out later if you want. You just need a couple people to anchor it down. And they are still indicating that there's almost like, seems to me like a preference for this being an in-person event, but they will entertain remotes. And we could potentially do something hybrid like we did last time of, having at least one person on the stage playing the recordings of others and kind of roll our own hybrid. The CNCF platform itself does not support hybrid per se, where a person comes in last minute because the stuff has to get digitized and they can't guarantee equal latency from the conference site versus coming in from some random place in the world. So they aren't willing to do that, but we can sort of pull it off ourselves if the live person just plays recordings. And I think last time they were able to support Q&A afterward if people joined remotely over Slack. It's not quite the same as a Zoom Q&A, but it worked. I think we took a few questions like that in the last one.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to be going on pat leave in a couple months, so I won't be able to attend, but I'm happy to help review this and get in good shape.
Yeah, so the whole group can be there, and I think either you, Walter, or Nick is going to have to submit. So the speakers have no particular requirements other than I guess they should be SIG members, but the person who fills out the form has to be, they're going to compare to make sure they're the SIG chair or tech lead. So you or Walter are going to have to send it in, but I'd be happy to do kind of the work of maintaining the draft and awesome. Get on that. But one of you is going to have to be around to actually send it in on the deadline.
Yep, I can do that. But yeah, I think I also like the idea of like doing giving like every provider like a slice of the time. I think the biggest hurdle there is like coordinating like more people to like put the content together. But aside from that, like
I kind of pieced it together and did the combo edit last time, and the feedback I'd have on that is that essentially everybody was late. It's hard. I declared a deadline, sort of like Walter's philosophy is you lie about the real deadline. But we managed to get it done, but I'd appreciate if it would have been easier if they had come in a little early, because it's kind of treacherous doing a video edit on a laptop versus I have a GPU on a home system that would make that a lot easier than getting these literally, I am unwilling to take them the night before because too much can go wrong, but I don't really want to do it even, I'd like to get it done a week before if possible. And then the other thing is there were people who cheated on some that were too long. You know, it's 35 minutes. So and it's harder to make a short one than a long one. I know that, but some of them I ended up having to speed up and edit and things like that, that maybe sort of moved them towards chipmunk voices and things, but would be better if people really did hit the 3-minute cap on these if we're going to get them from a lot of cloud providers.
You know what you could tell people, and I know that I'm one of the people who just turned in the slide because I had no bandwidth last time.
Yeah.
But you know what you could tell people is I will play the first 3 minutes of whatever you send me, and then I will cut it off. So you choose. If you would like to send me extra bonus content that I'm not going to use, go for it. I will use the first 3 minutes of what you send me, the end. And that way it's in their hands.
Yeah, I don't know. And then the other thing is, of course, I didn't even realize it last time, but you're expected to publish a deck of your presentation and upload it to SCAD. So I really wanted the decks that people presented, and I managed to get them, but it was extra work. And this time I'm going to be smart enough to ask for that up front so that I
Expected. That is skippable, FYI.
Okay, but anyway, that's it for my agenda item.
Awesome. Thank you. So given the next SIG meeting is going to be before this deadline, yeah, it'd be good if maybe like next week, maybe on Slack, in the Slack channel, we can touch base and make sure we're all on the same page of who's going to
Leave comments in the doc itself or in the Slack channel. I think either one would work.
Yeah, or maybe oh, I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but I'll leave a comment inside Steve's document. I'll write comment here if you're interested in contributing content. And then folks can just like add their names to that thread, and that way Steve knows who's interested. All right, should we end 10 minutes early then? Anything else folks want to discuss? All right, I'll see you on 2 weeks then.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Later.
Bye.